Okay, I think that's everybody in, so I'm going to make a start. Welcome everyone to this Sunday's TSV Zoom. We have hopefully got for you the greatest show in the galaxy this evening. We are reuniting several key individuals from the greatest show in the galaxy, and I'm pleased to introduce to you the lovely Jessica Martin.
Hello.
I introduce to you Chris Jury, and I'll also introduce Stephen Wyatt to you. How are you all, hope you're all well, everyone?
We're great. Well, I am.
Well, that's a great, honest answer. That starts us off well this evening. Okay, I'm going to start with you, Stephen. Obviously, you were the brains and the pen behind the greatest show in the galaxy. I'm interested, just first of all, to just get into the mindset of how you come about imagining a story such as that.
Well, it's an interesting one. I remember watching not the DVD, the video came out. I sat with somebody who I didn't know very well, who said to me, "What were you on when you wrote this show?" And it had a very long, complicated history, basically. It started out, J&G wanted to do a show set in Longleat, which was all about the exhibits, and this became unworkable. Then it became a show about computers, which is where the name of the Whiz Kid came from. And indeed, Mags was in that version. There was a Glaswegian werewolf in the computer version. Bet you're sorry you never got to play that one, Jessica.
I'll be working on it for the next time, Stephen. Don't worry.
Oh, great. And then it gradually turned into a piece about a circus, which I think was when it became interesting, because Paradise Towers started with my experiences of tower blocks. And this did start with the idea that I really, really hate clowns. And so that's where that was the way in, really. I mean, before we go, I just have to say that Andrew Cartmel was the most incredible script editor, that a large chunk of what is in the piece and the ideas behind it come from him and from working with him.
What's it like crafting a script for something like Doctor Who? Because it's quite episodic, and obviously you've got a certain format to follow. Do you find that more challenging?
Well, it's a long time ago, 35 years ago. The thing was, it was originally a 3-part studio piece, and then just when we'd got all that nicely worked out, it turned out into a 4-part show with an extra episode of outside broadcast stuff. And I made the decision, talking to Andrew, to put almost all the new material into an episode about people getting there. So it is a very complicated, I mean, one of the great things about Doctor Who is there's a huge amount of freedom. You know, as long as you deliver the companion and the Doctor in some sort of shape at the end of it, you can do what you like. But keeping the elements, balancing the elements and finding the climaxes is quite tough.
And how many iterations would the script go through normally in that process? How many iterations did it go through?
I honestly can't remember. I mean, there were about at least 5 major rethinks of the outline. And that when I mean, when the point where we've got an outline now, and then, oh, we haven't. I mean, 5 versions of those. It had because there was quite a gap between when it was commissioned and when it went out. There was a lot of rethinking went on. And for once, I think we were lucky in that almost all the rethinking made it better, which is not always the case, to say the least.
And were you still rewriting? Were you still shaping the script by the time you were at the rehearsal stage, would you say?
No. I mean, I think there may have been Jessica and Chris can correct me on this, but I think very little, apart from the odd phrase here or there, changed once we started to rehearse and record it.
And obviously this is the part where both you, Jessica and Chris, you sort of enter stage left effectively, and the first time that you all come together is at the read-through and rehearsals. How did the parts on the show come about for you both? Jessica, do you want to start?
I am going to be very long-winded if Chris wants to go first, but actually, I don't know who was cast first. Stephen, can you remember how the order of menu was as regards the casting?
Not really, because I didn't have much to do with it, to be honest. I mean,
Okay.
JNT didn't really, by and large, consult the writer about the casting. You know.
Yes.
I mean, I remember saying hooray when we got T.P. Bekema, because I wanted him to play the chief caretaker in Paradise Towers. But I didn't really have any say in it. I'm sorry, I would like to say that I made you both stars, but I had nothing to do.
Well, I mean, as is so often the case in the biz anyway, things seem to have happen haphazardly, but then in retrospect, there seems to be an amazing sort of pattern and raison d'etre to everything. And jumping ahead all the decades later, I think it's true to say, and Stephen will nod his head emphatically, that Mags had an incredible impact that I could never have foreseen in so many different ways on my career, let alone as being part of the Hooniverse. But anyway, enough of that. So I was called by my agent, and I was very excited about this call because the Doctor Who people wanted to have a meeting with me. And in those days, I was, I can say this now with no humility whatsoever, because back in the 80s, for a brief time, I had this brush with meteoric television fame. I'd been an impressionist, and I was behind the scenes on Spitting Image, and that's not my phone, is it? No. Spitting Image, and I was on a sketch show called Copycats, and at the time of the Doctor Who casting, I had been a guest on a Saturday night variety show hosted by Jimmy Tarbuck, and I'll tell you why that's significant later on. So I was invited to JNT's offices at the BBC in the good old days of Television Centre, which was exciting in itself because two things: Doctor Who, and also coming from this world of television variety. This was my chance to audition for an acting role. Really, I know it's Doctor Who, but it was a straight acting role, no singing and dancing, and part of a pop culture phenomenon that I'd grown up with. I'd grown up watching Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee were my doctors. So, but I went in, and at that time, I think, again, because so many things were happening to me, yes, I was excited because it was Doctor Who, but it sort of, it didn't floor me. It was like, yeah, I'm going to meet these people, and you know, if something comes of it, great, and if not, you know, I wonder what the phone call will be tomorrow. That's the way things were. And when I went into the meeting, I didn't expect John Nathan Turner to look quite the way he did. I don't know what I imagined a sci-fi TV producer to look like, but he just looked sort of straight out of, I was going to say Las Vegas, but it'd probably be Blackpool. You know, he had this floral shirt on, gold bracelets, he had a medallion on, and this very soft, persuasive voice. It was always sort of hypnotic, leaning over the table. Jessica, thank you so much for coming in to meet us. Can I introduce you to Gary? So Gary came in, and Gary, to my eyes, looked a bit like John Pertwee. He sort of had this long face, looked like John Pertwee, but had long hair. And Gary, of course, was, as I found out later, was John's better half, and a great influence on John's decisions. And thankfully, he and John and Gary had both loved my Judy Garland impression on Jimmy Tarbuck's Tarby and Friends. And this was a catalyst for them to bring me in to read for the part of Mags, who is an intergalactic punk werewolf. Nowadays, you'd call her a goth or an emo. in those days, she was kind of a bit like, you know, Susie from Susie and the Banshees in looks. And as far as auditioning went, the only thing that I really had to do of significance was Alan Waring, the director, was called into the room because we'd all made nice, and John and Gary let it be known that they were great fans of my impression. And then I was asked to get on the floor and become a werewolf. So, you know, who was I to question? I want the job. I'll do whatever. Just got on the floor, growled. And I don't think Alan was going to argue with what John and Gary wanted. And yeah, but my agent and John sealed the deal, and I started work on The Greatest Show in the Galaxy in the early summer of 1988.
When you say it quickly, it doesn't seem that long ago.
It isn't that long ago. What is time, especially when we've been in lockdown? I think this is the year that melted, and Doctor Who is about time and space. And I think when we talk about The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, I hope I'm speaking for everybody in this, and I'm not just an actress who's scared of growing old, but I think it was very much a spatial thing. Time wasn't the thing. We just had this space. And it's still, you know, every time we get together, we inhabit that space again. Anyway, that's enough of me. Move on to your next guest.
Chris, how about your story?
Well, it's a lot simpler and hopefully a lot quicker. That's a joke, by the way. The very first series of Lovejoy had been filmed in the summer of 1985, and Alan Waring had been the first assistant director on a number of the episodes. And Alan and I had got on very well. We hadn't got on, but neither of us had got on very well with the actual director who had been directing that episode. But anyway, he and I got on very well. So, and after that, he got promoted in the BBC to be a director. And then he went and did a couple of EastEnders, I think, or a Casualty and a couple of EastEnders. And then this was very early in his directing career. And, you know, he asked, you know, I was in the frame. But then I found out many years later that I was also in the frame because the year Sylvester became the Doctor, I had been asked to go to see JNT. And on some website, which I'm sure our guests at this session will know somewhere, there's a list of people who apparently auditioned for Doctor Who. And I'm on that list. Now, this was a fecking surprise to me because I'd gone to see JNT, but I didn't know I was going to see him for Doctor Who. And then there were a load of us who also did episodes then subsequently who had been up David Fielder. There were a number of other people who had been to that meeting with JNT who then did episodes in Sylvester's time. So, yeah, that's what happened.
So you went in for that, and ultimately this came out as a part. This part came out as a part of that. Do you think?
Well, how long had Sylvester been? Was it the second season Sylvester had been Doctor Who?
This was the second season of.
So it wasn't, you know. So the meeting I had with him must have been 18 months or a year before we shot this. So it's not, you know, a direct link. But as I say, there were a number of people who I have worked with since, who were also in one of Sylvester's episodes, who had gone to see JNT to have this meeting that some of us knew was for Doctor Who, but I certainly didn't.
Well, when I started writing Paradise Towers, the Doctor hadn't been cast. And it was only subsequently it was possible to actually make it a bit more Sylvester. And one of the joys of Greatest Show is you could write it for Sylvester and bring in all those clowning and juggling skills, you know, whereas in Paradise Towers he's a bit generic for that reason.
Yeah.
So you could have been Doctor Who, Chris?
Well, manifestly not, but
You've still got a chance.
I
There's still...
well, that's true, yeah.
So have you, Jessica.
Yeah, we'd need a fecking time machine though, wouldn't we? You know, but
Not at all.
you know, this is what 30 years in showbiz does to a man.
So
what was extraordinary with Chris is when we did Psychic Circus last year, which was a return to the greatest show in the galaxy, and Chris returned as Deadbeat come Kingpin. He sounded exactly the same, but you hadn't aged at all in your voice, Chris. It was quite extraordinary.
Well, perhaps not in my voice or my emotional maturity, but certainly physically, yeah. No, that was great fun. That was great fun. I loved doing that.
It was
lovely to be, you know, work with Ian and all the gang, and it was a really good script and good fun, and I really enjoyed doing that, I have to say.
It was good fun. It was.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's got a plethora of brilliance in the way of its acting performers there for sure, and T.P. McKenna nonetheless, of course, a couple of the others. But you know, you turn up on the first day of rehearsals, you've got all these wonderful people sat there. I mean, it must be a little bit daunting when you're going into a show like Doctor Who, when you turn up as guest or supporting artists for that particular story. Do the sort of main cast make you very welcome in that circumstance?
Yes.
Oh, it was lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those jobs where we all became a family, and that does happen a lot in shows. But something like this, because it was 4 episodes, so you weren't in, do 3 days and then you're out. It was over a period. But then, of course, we had the asbestos scare at Television Centre. So then there was like a delay. I think we had the read through, and then we didn't actually film anything for a month, or there was quite a long period anyway. And then we were now doing it as a location shoot, and that was great, you know. And we went to Weymouth and to the famous Doctor Who sandpit at Weymouth and all of that. It was fantastic. And I mean, to turn up and work with the cast that we worked, I mean, it was just, I mean, TP. Peggy Mount. I mean, Peggy Mount was a legend. I see she's with us on the guest list. Actually, she's looking very good.
I was going to mention that.
No, she's looking very good. Although the beard is a bit stronger than it used to be. But you know, Peggy Mount, T.P. McKenna. I mean, I mean, and it made the delays in filming and everything fantastic, because if nothing else, we could all listen to T.P. McKenna telling another anecdote.
I mean, you had to.
By Christ, he had some.
I can only imagine. I mean, you shared quite a lot of screen time with him, Jessica. I mean, you
Yes.
were alongside him. I mean, that must have been a delight.
Oh, it was wonderful, because he was an idol to me for a couple of reasons. So in the 60s and 70s, when I was but an embryo, but you know, any drama that you saw on a Saturday, Sunday night, there were all these programs like, you know, The Avengers, The Persuaders, Brian Clement's Thriller, and T.P. McKenna he'd be there, rather like, you know how Kieran Hines is the ubiquitous, you know, distinguished Irish actor who turns up and does the character roles. That was T.P. McKenna back then. But I was brought up a Catholic in North Finchley, and I always remember the church that we went to, St. Philip's in Finchley Central. The altar boy was Stephen McKenna, who is T.P. McKenna's eldest son. And sometimes you'd see T.P. McKenna sitting there, you know, in one of the seats on his knees saying his prayers. Oh my God, if only the priest had heard the colour of the words that we heard sometimes on the set.
He was because I've only ever heard one person swear more, apart from me, I've only ever heard one person swear more, and that's Brian Blessed. But TP, my God, he'd give it some.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
because I don't know, I don't know, Chris and Stephen, whether you know whether he worked with them, but every time I used to listen to TP's stories, I could just immediately see him with Peter O'Toole, Richard Harris and Richard Burton. He was like the last of the Hellraisers, but he still went to church and eventually say he wasn't quite a Hellraiser.
Yeah.
But he just, when he said something, it was a piece of poetry. So everyone shut up, listen to what TP's saying now. And the one thing that I do remember him saying to me when we were on set was, and it was apropos of nothing, it could have been my bad acting, I don't know, but he just said, what I've noticed most in my years as an actor is that actually acting is not an active thing at all. It's not a proactive thing. Acting is reacting. And you can do more by listening. If you just, people think that if they've got a line, they're doing something. And if they're not there. No, it's all about reacting. And that's something, we're speaking about Peggy Mount, and Peggy Mount I'd worked with a couple of times before Doctor Who. We shared an agent. I'm letting the side down now, but it's no secret that in our industry, the big agents, if they've got several people in their stable, where possible, they'll sort of, oh, if you're doing this, have you thought of that so-and-so for this role? So Peggy and I were with a very, very influential agency, the Richard Stone agency, but she was an amazing person because, like TP, she had the aura, she had the legend about her, but both she and TP were so down to earth, and he was paternal and she was maternal. And maybe that's why, together with Sylvester, who also is a very humble and a very approachable man, that's why we had that camaraderie. Nobody was throwing their toys out the pram, nobody was being a diva, because the top divas in the company were so lovely that you couldn't do that. And
it definitely sets a tone.
Yes.
And I mean TP, and he'd always start, yes, when I played the bastard at Derby in 1920, and we're all going, well, you do that every time, don't you, anyway? And, it was hilarious. And I said to him, at the time, a very British coup had just come out. It was on the telly when we were rehearsing. And an actor called Ray McAnally was in that.
Oh, yes.
An Irish actor called Ray McAnally. And I said to TP in the rehearsals, I said, have you seen A Very British Coup, TP? Because Ray McAnally is very good, isn't it? I mean, do you know Ray? And he said, don't effing talk to me about Ray effing McAnally ever again. That man has dogged my career for fun. And I'm like, whoa. It was a real insight into the Irish, the jealousies and what's-its of the Irish stage scene.
But Jesus, he was the only Irish actor in the village, that effing Ray McAnally or whoever.
Ray effing bloody Ray bloody effing Nally was hilarious.
Stephen, I'm just interested to ask you I mean, when you're writing something like this, you visualize in your mind the characters, and then you see the characters as they are when the actual sort of production comes together. How far apart is that, or are you quite happy with or were you quite happy with the way it had come together?
Well, in this particular case, I mean, it was actually perfectly cast. This is not always the case and dare I say, it wasn't always the case in Paradise Towers. But in this case, there was nobody who didn't take it on. I mean, writing a script is a collaborative act. If you want to control it all, write a novel. But if the whole point about this is you're giving it over to actors to take it further, to discover things in. And I mean, sometimes you can get nasty shocks and you think they missed the point. In this case, everybody was absolutely on shot. I mean, the thing I want to say, because it's it's the only thing that ever annoys me that people say about Greatest Show. They always say Ian Reddington was magnificent, despite the fact that he didn't have many lines. And I always want to say he was great because I didn't give him many lines deliberately, because I knew what subconsciously when I was writing it, if you have a figure like that, if he goes blathering on and on, he loses all his status. And it was one of the defining images of me for the whole piece, because, you know, when I started talking about clowns, Andrew Cartmel and everybody thought I meant sort of Ronald McDonald, Coco the Clown sort of clowns. I said, no, no, no. I remember from my youth, these really scary men in spangly suits with white faces who never got dirty, never did slapstick, and they were the clowns. The others were the Augusts. They were just the runners-up, if you see. And so I suppose I didn't have it. I mean, Ian, like everybody else, took it on the whole stage, but it was, I did have an image in my head of what this character was going to be like. And that's why it was written the way it was.
Oh yes, there's no doubt Ian went into it 110%. He put heart and soul into the role, and it's quite menacing and it's done right. And I think you're right in what you say, you know, the less lines, I think, doesn't need it. That part's just menacing in its own way.
I agree, yes.
I'm just going to pause there and just mention that, of course, we're doing these TSB Zooms in aid of the Theatre Support Fund. Now, we haven't been charging entry to come in, but what we are asking is, I know we have a number of our regulars in tonight who hopefully have already donated or gone onto the shop, but if you are new to us and haven't done so yet, please check out the link that we're going to drop in the chat in just a few seconds. That is the link to the Theatre Support website, where you can either make a donation or you can browse the shop and buy some items. It's all in a fantastic cause. It is a cause I know that's very dear to the hearts of all of my panel this evening, because realistically, what's happened in the last 12 months has decimated the industry.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be a challenge to pick back up from it. I don't know if any of you have any particular views on that.
It's going to be a challenge.
Yes, it's going to be a challenge. I know from my friends in the industry, and I know from the amount of crossings out I've had in my diary for things that were, oh, we're going to do this, and it's going to be all COVID safe, and then suddenly all the goalposts changed. And in fact, there's a petition going out today, which is for self-employment, but people are petitioning to try and get the payments out quicker, because really this hand-to-mouth existence, and for people in the theatre industry, we've never had security anyway, but this just kind of pulls the rug out totally. The only positive thing that I can say is that theatre people are resilient, and by their very nature, they are creative. So I think there is going to be a renaissance when we come out of this. I fully believe it's going to be not necessarily bigger, but it's going to be different, and it's going to be surprising, and it's going to be wonderful. So
I think there'll also be a new appreciation. I think as a regular theatre goer, I have absolutely missed the experience of going to the theatre, and I'm never going to turn down the opportunity to go and see a show again, I think, ever.